And so I'd like to point out to you how I see shadows and highlights in nature. Hello everybody, this is Paul Jones again from Painting with Paul. Glad to be back with you. Today we're going to get outside the studio and go on a brief nature walk. And I'd like to give you my perspective on how I see nature and apply those visions and different scenes and textures to my paintings. Come along for the ride. So this is our first stop on our nature walk. And what I'd like to point out to you is the numerous textures that Mother Nature has to offer. And what I want to point out to you is how this brilliant sunlight hits these textures and creates shadows and highlights that I incorporate into my paintings. Starting with the tree trunk of this pine tree, we notice that this texture is excessively rough texture. For the most part, the shadows are all in a vertical pattern as they go up the tree trunk. Dark on this side, light on this side, makes for a very nice texture and a sharp contrast. So going to a different tree right next to it, we notice how smooth this bark is, but yet it still has the highlight and the dark on this side. The shadow that is casted on the floor of the woods all comes into play when you're making paintings realistically. If you notice how dead these leaves are all around here, but yet there are shadows that fall through from other trees all along the floor. These are just things just that I notice every time I do a painting, the fine details. Looking at this greenery in the same area, you notice how the sun is casting shadows right onto the petals of each leaf here. Around the base of the trunk here is moss that is also highlighted very brilliantly, but then has deep shadows over here also. This indicates that it's a very sunny day in your painting. On our second stop, there's something that I noticed on this trail which I find rather interesting when it comes to shadows. This hole, this natural hole in this tree trunk here, appears to be black at a great distance. So when you're painting things on a canvas, the darkness of this determines how close you are to the object. So if we were standing 100 feet away from this tree trunk here, that hole would appear really, really dark, like just black. This is the third stop on our nature walk. And one thing I'd like to point out to you is the idea of depth when you're making a painting. If you notice this trail here, how it goes into the horizon, notice how narrow it gets the farther it gets away, and then how wide it gets coming up here. When I'm working on a painting, if I were going to do this scene right here, I would definitely start in the background with that blue sky, get that all painted in first, and whatever comes next, I paint everything in order as it comes up into the picture. The closer it is to the foreground here, the bigger it gets, the more texture you begin to see. And if I were doing this, it would be that pine tree in the very background. You may not be able to see it on the camera, but as it comes into the picture, I start overlapping branches in trees as they come this way. On our fourth stop on our nature walk, I'd like to point out how the sun is affecting the floor of the woods here. Notice how dark these leaves are, and then all of a sudden, where there's bright sunlight, look how light they are. Now it's the same leaf pattern all over, scattered all across the floor of the woods, but you're going to have to change colors if you were to paint this scene to a lot of lights, whites and yellows and oranges. And every time there's a shadow that crosses, we're going to have to adjust and use dark browns and dark blues to make those shadows, yet keeping the same leaf pattern. I'm here in the beautiful woods of Alabama on this nature walk, and there are so many plants that I haven't ever seen before, such as this branch on the tree. This bark is just peeling itself apart. It looks like, it appears that way. All these flat spots, But to me, it's beautiful. It's all part of Mother Nature's gift to us, and something that I might use for future reference. So if I'm out here, I'm going to be taking pictures of this as it leads down to the trunk. And when I get to the trunk, look at this bubbly bark. This is a texture I have never seen on Plant Life ever. But yet, I would use that in a reference if necessary. To me, it's beautiful. There's so much to see out here in the great outdoors. So we came to this canyon area, and I'd like to point something out. If you like to paint skies and you want to paint the blue in it, especially if you have a large amount of sky showing, I'd like to point out what I notice. Toward the top of the sky, as it gets higher in the sky, is much darker blue. But as it transitions down into the horizon in all directions, can you see how it gets lighter and lighter and lighter as it goes toward the horizon? That's one thing to keep in mind when you're painting large amount of sky space. Just something that I've pointed out and I'd like to share with you, things that I notice. Hey, thank you very much for taking this nature walk with me and letting me be able to demonstrate to you what I see in terms of perspective, lights, darks, textures. And until next time, I hope you join me again. Thanks a lot.